after 25 years of marriage. My husband looked across the dinner table and said the words that split my world in two. I think I need someone younger. He said it casually, as if he were ordering a new car, as if our memories, our laughter, and the home we built together were just an old piece of furniture he could replace. I remember the clink of his fork, the way he didn't even look guilty, just tired of the woman who had stood beside him through every storm. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My hands trembled, my heart sank, but my face stayed calm, because while he was speaking, I realized something he didn't. The version of me he was discarding was not the woman I had become, and before that night was over, he would see it too, in a way he would never forget. People think heartbreak breaks you down, but sometimes it clears your vision. That night, when he told me he wanted someone younger, I didn't cry. I smiled because I already knew the truth that would leave him speechless. Asterisk from the outside. We were the kind of couple everyone admired. A big house, long vacations, family dinners filled with laughter. Friends often said, "You two are still so in love after all these years." I would smile politely, not having the courage to admit that love, in our home, had slowly turned into routine. He was successful, a man everyone respected, and I was the quiet woman beside him, the one who remembered birthdays, hosted dinners, and kept everything running smoothly. But what people didn't see were the silences, the way he came home later each night, the excuses about work, the distance that grew between every conversation. I told myself it was just a phase. Every marriage goes through ups and downs, but deep down, I knew. I could feel it in the way his eyes drifted when I spoke, the way his touch became mechanical, as if affection had turned into obligation. Still, I stayed, not because I was weak, but because 25 years isn't something you walk away from easily. I kept hoping that maybe, one morning, he'd look at me the way he used to, with admiration, not boredom. But the morning never came. Instead, came that dinner, that quiet confession, that one sentence that shattered everything I believed in. Yet even in that moment of humiliation, something inside me stayed still, a strength I didn't know I had, because when a man tells you he wants someone younger, what he's really saying is that he no longer recognizes your worth. And that night, I decided to remind him exactly who he had underestimated. Asterisk. It's strange how the heart senses danger long before the mind admits it. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere, quiet, subtle, like shadows creeping through a locked room. But love makes you blind, and hope makes you foolish. It began with the little things. He started leaving his phone face down on the table. The password changed. The late meetings turned into overnight business trips. When I asked how work was going, he would sigh and say, "You wouldn't understand. Once upon a time, he used to share everything with me, every victory, every setback. But now, his world had doors I was no longer allowed to open. He stopped noticing me, too. I'd spend hours cooking his favorite meal, only for him to eat in silence, scrolling through his phone. When I wore the blue dress he once said made me look irresistible, he didn't even look up. There was a time when his eyes followed me across a room. Now, I could stand in front of him and feel invisible. The worst part wasn't the distance. It was the guilt he made me feel for noticing it. "You're being paranoid," he'd say, whenever I asked if something was wrong. "You always imagine things." And because I loved him, I believed him. I convinced myself that maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I just needed to try harder, love deeper, give more. So I gave more. I softened my tone, cooked his favorites, smiled when my heart was breaking. I tried to fill the silence between us with kindness, but silence doesn't drown easily. It only grows heavier. There was one evening that still replays in my mind. I had spent all day preparing a dinner to celebrate our anniversary. I lit candles, set the table with our wedding china, and waited. He came home 3 hours late, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. He said he'd grab drinks with colleagues. I nodded, pretending not to notice the lipstick stain faintly smudged on his collar. That night, I washed the dishes in silence and realized something that hurt more than betrayal itself. He didn't even care enough to hide it well anymore. Still, I said nothing, because the woman I was then, she still believed she could fix what was already broken. But the truth is, love cannot survive where respect has died. And deep inside, I knew our story was changing, sentence by sentence, even if I wasn't ready to read the ending yet. Asterisk. It was raining that night, the kind of rain that feels like the sky is trying to warn you. The house was quiet, too quiet. and I was sitting by the window waiting for his car to pull into the driveway. He was supposed to be home by 8. At first, I kept checking the clock every few minutes, then every hour. By midnight, I'd stopped counting. My phone buzzed. A message: "Don't wait up. Busy with work." No apology, no warmth, just cold distance in 7 words. Something inside me broke in that moment, not because I didn't believe him, but because, for the first time, I knew I shouldn't. When trust begins to crumble, silence becomes unbearable. I walked into his study, looking for a reason, any sign that my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. His laptop was open, screen glowing faintly in the dark, and there it was, a message preview in the corner of the screen, a woman's name I didn't recognize, a line that read, "Last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you." My breath caught, the room spun, my heart raced, not from shock, but from the confirmation of what I already knew. The truth wasn't a surprise, it was a slow realization finally finding its proof. I clicked the message. There were dozens of them. Photos, plans, words I hadn't heard from him in years. Tender, passionate, alive, but they weren't for me. They were for her. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen while the rain beat against the window. My whole body went numb. 25 years of memories played in my mind. Our wedding, the laughter, the struggles we overcame, all rewritten in the light of his betrayal. He came home around 2 a.m., his tie was loose, hair slightly messy. When he saw me sitting there, he froze. "You're still awake?" he asked, trying to sound casual. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. He glanced at the laptop. His expression changed, guilt flickered, then panic, then a cold sort of anger. "So you were snooping now," he said. "Is this what we've come to?" I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask why, but the words wouldn't come. I just stood up, slowly, and said, "No, this is what you've made us." Then I walked past him, leaving his excuses behind me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of our bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the rain. It was strange that tears didn't come, only silence did, a heavy, suffocating silence that marked the end of something sacred. That was the night I stopped being his wife. Even if the papers hadn't said it yet. Asterisk. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains like nothing had happened. The birds sang, the world moved on, but inside me, everything had changed. He came down to breakfast as if it were any other day. No apology, no guilt, just his usual, composed self. The man who believed control was power. He poured his coffee, checked his phone, and said, "We need to talk." I looked up at him. "Yes," I said. "We do," he sighed, almost rehearsed, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way, but maybe it's for the best. We've both known for a while that things weren't the same." I stayed silent. Sometimes silence is the loudest response you can give. He continued, "I just need something different now. Someone who understands me." "You've changed." The irony nearly made me laugh. I had changed for him, for the life we built, for the sacrifices he never saw. He leaned back, trying to soften his tone. "It's not about you. I just need to feel alive again." That's when I finally spoke. My voice didn't shake. "And to feel alive, you decided to destroy the only person who ever believed in you." He looked uncomfortable for the first time. "Don't be dramatic. People grow apart. You'll be fine." I smiled, not out of amusement, but realization. "You're right. I will be fine, but you won't be." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up slowly, walked to the window, and said, "You spent years building an image of yourself that depended on me, my loyalty, my silence, my devotion. But that ends today. You wanted someone younger. Go. But don't expect to find the version of me you took for granted waiting here when you come back." His face hardened. "So that's it. You're giving up." "No," I said quietly. "I'm letting go." For the first time in years, I felt something powerful, peace, because when you stop begging someone to stay, you start reclaiming yourself. He tried to speak, but I didn't let him. "You don't get to define who I am anymore. You don't get to walk in and out of my heart when it's convenient. You've made your choice. Now live with it." The room fell silent. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up his coffee cup. He didn't know what to say, because for once, the control wasn't his dot. As he left the room, I realized that confrontation isn't about shouting or crying. It's about clarity. It's the moment you stop trying to be understood and start choosing yourself instead. That morning, I didn't cry. I didn't break. I just exhaled, and in that breath, I found freedom. I just exhaled, and in that breath, I found freedom. The days that followed were eerily quiet. No shouting, no apologies, just the hollow sound of a house that suddenly felt too big for one heart. His clothes were still in the closet, his toothbrush still by the sink, but his presence was gone. And in its place stood an emptiness I had to learn to live with. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. For 25 years, my life revolved around him, his schedule, his needs, his moods. Every choice I made, every plan I built, was attached to the word us. But now, it was just me. And that word felt unfamiliar. The mornings were the hardest. I would wake up expecting to hear the sound of his footsteps, the rustle of his tie, the scent of his cologne fading down the hallway. But instead, there was only silence, the kind that echoed your own breathing. Grief has many faces. Mine wore a smile. I went about my day pretending everything was normal, watering the plants, cleaning the kitchen, answering friends' calls with, "I'm fine." But when night came, I would sit by the window, stare into the darkness, and wonder if love was ever real, or just a story I told myself to survive. Then, one afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, I found an old box, labeled Her Dreams. It was filled with sketches, half-written poems, and a letter I'd written to myself when I was 22, a letter full of plans, places I wanted to visit, things I wanted to create. I had forgotten that version of me existed, the woman who dreamed before she became someone's wife. I sat there for hours, surrounded by dust and memories, reading the words of a girl who believed in herself, and something shifted inside me. That night, I made tea, opened a journal, and wrote a single sentence. I want to meet her again, the woman I used to be. It wasn't a plan or a declaration. It was a promise, a quiet, sacred one. The next morning, I went for a walk by the lake. The air felt different, lighter somehow. I watched the sunrise, colors spilling across the sky like forgiveness. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about him. I was thinking about me. I realized I had spent so long being someone's wife that I had forgotten how to be my own person. I had given him my best years, but that didn't mean the best of me was gone. Healing doesn't happen overnight. It's not loud or dramatic. It's in the small things, making breakfast for one, laughing at your own thoughts, sleeping peacefully again. It's in learning that your worth never depended on being chosen, but on choosing yourself every single day. And that's exactly what I started to do. It had been 3 months since he left. 3 months of silence, of rediscovering myself piece by piece. I had stopped counting the days, stopped checking my phone, stopped wondering where he was. I was beginning to like the sound of my own company again. Then, one evening, I heard the sound of his car in the driveway. For a moment, I froze. Old instincts tried to surface. The rush to fix my hair, to straighten my posture, to appear composed. But I didn't move. I simply waited. The door opened, and there he was, the man who once made my world feel too small. But this time, I saw him clearly. His shoulders looked heavier, his confidence dimmer, his eyes unsure. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice softer than I remembered. I nodded, not because I owed him anything, but because I was no longer afraid of what he might say. He sat at the same table, where he had once told me he wanted someone younger. The irony didn't escape me. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then he finally said, "I made a mistake." I looked at him, steady and calm. "You did?" He swallowed hard, as if my composure unsettled him. "It wasn't what I thought. She wasn't who I thought she was. I don't know what I was chasing." There it was, the confession that should have meant something, but didn't. He continued, "We've spent so much together, 25 years. I don't want to throw it all away." I almost pitied him. Almost, because for the first time, I could see that what he wanted wasn't me. He wanted comfort, familiarity, someone to clean up the mess his ego had made. I smiled faintly. "You already threw it away, the moment you decided I wasn't enough." He flinched slightly. I was wrong. I leaned forward. "No. You were honest back then. You wanted someone younger, and you got what you wanted. What you didn't expect was that I'd learn to live without you." The silence between us grew thick. He looked around the room, maybe hoping to find traces of the woman who used to worship him, but she was gone. "I miss you," he whispered. I stood up, walked toward the window, and said quietly, "You miss the version of me who made your world easier, not the woman I am now." He looked smaller somehow, like the years had finally caught up with him. "Can't we just start over?" he asked. I turned to him, and for the first time, there was no anger left in me, only clarity. "You ended that story. I've already started a new one." He stared at me, waiting for a sign of softness, a hint of hesitation, but there was none. I was done being his second choice. When he left that night, I didn't cry. I didn't feel loss or relief, only closure. Because sometimes the real power isn't in walking away. It's in being the one who doesn't look back. Asterisk, it's strange how life begins to bloom again when you finally stop watering the wrong garden. The days after his visit were lighter. I started doing small things just for me, things I hadn't done in decades. I enrolled in an art class, the same one I used to dream about before marriage. My hands trembled when I first picked up a brush, but soon the strokes became steady, confident, alive. Every morning, I made myself coffee and took it out to the porch, watching the sunrise, something I'd never allowed myself time for. I started to enjoy silence, not as loneliness, but as peace. People around me began to notice the change. My friends said I looked different, softer, happier. One even joked, "You look 10 years younger." Maybe it wasn't youth, maybe it was freedom. I began traveling, to small trips at first, then longer ones. I walked along beaches alone, wandered through art galleries, learned to eat dinner without needing someone across the table. I stopped dressing to please anyone. I wore what made me feel alive, and slowly, I realized I didn't need to find myself. I had always been here. I was just buried under years of compromise and quiet endurance. One evening, while painting in my studio, I caught my reflection in the window. There was a softness in my eyes, but also strength. I saw the woman I'd once promised to meet again, and there she was, waiting, smiling back. The more I grew, the less I thought about him, not because I hated him, but because he no longer occupied space in my life. His choices were his own burden to carry. Mine were my liberation. There was a kind of power in knowing he couldn't hurt me anymore, not because he'd stopped trying, but because I'd stopped caring. I built new routines, new friendships, new dreams. I even started mentoring younger women, those who were walking through the same quiet heartbreak I once did. I told them what I had learned. Don't beg for love to stay. Become so whole that when love leaves, it takes nothing from you. With every passing day, I grew lighter, happier, and for the first time in years, when I laughed, it wasn't to fill the silence. It was because I truly meant it. Asterisk, it had been almost 2 years since I last saw him. 2 years since I watched the man I once loved walk away, chasing a mirage of youth and excitement. By then, my world was entirely different. My art had started to sell. I was hosting a small exhibition at a downtown gallery, something I'd only ever dreamed about. The evening was warm, the room glowing with soft golden lights, and the walls were covered with my paintings, pieces that carried every fragment of my healing. I was standing near a canvas titled "Becoming Whole," when I heard a voice behind me, a voice that once made my heart skip. "Is this your work?" I turned. There he was. He looked older, not just in years, but in spirit. The charm that once seemed effortless now felt forced, almost desperate. His hair had grayed, and there were tired lines across his face. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, and in that silence, I realized something profound. I no longer felt pain, just peace. "Yes," I finally said, smiling softly. "All of it." He looked around, eyes scanning the paintings as if trying to read between the colors. "You've changed," he murmured. "No," I replied gently. "I just stopped hiding." For a brief second, he looked as though he wanted to apologize, but the words never came. Maybe he didn't know how. Maybe he thought it was too late. He asked about my life, my travels, my art. I answered politely, but without the old ache that used to follow his name. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. I wasn't the woman waiting for him to see my worth. I was the woman who had already found it. As the evening went on, I excused myself to speak to a few guests. I saw him watching me from across the room, not with desire, but with something deeper, regret. And in that moment, I finally understood what healing truly meant. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was standing in the same room as the person who once broke you, and feeling absolutely nothing but gratitude that you survived before leaving. He came to me once more. "You seem happy," he said quietly. "I am," I replied, "and I hope you find that for yourself too." He nodded, hesitated for a moment, and then walked away. This time, I didn't watch him go, because I no longer needed closure. I already had it in the life I built without him. As the gallery lights dimmed and guests began to leave, I stood before my painting one last time, a self-portrait hidden among abstract strokes. A self-portrait hidden among abstract strokes. A woman reborn, and I smiled, whispering softly to myself, After 25 years, he wanted someone younger, but I became someone wiser. A few months after the gallery night, an envelope arrived at my doorstep. It was handwritten, my name spelled in a familiar, slightly tilted handwriting I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, I froze. I could almost hear his voice in those lines. My heart fluttered, not from love, but from the ghost of what once was. I opened it carefully. Dear Anna, I saw your name in a magazine article about your art show. You looked radiant, truly radiant. I don't know if I have the right to say this, but I'm proud of you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I think about you, about the years we shared, about the woman I never fully understood. I thought I needed someone new to feel alive, but the truth is, I've never felt more hollow. She left, you know, the woman I thought I wanted, and now I live in a quiet house filled with memories I can't escape. I wish I had loved you better. I wish I had stayed. David, I read it twice, not because I missed him, but because I wanted to honor the woman I used to be, the one who would have given anything to hear those words. I sat by the window, the afternoon light pouring across the floor, the letter trembling in my hands. Once I might have cried. Once I might have taken him back, hoping that love could rebuild what betrayal had shattered, but not anymore. I took a deep breath, opened my drawer, and pulled out a letter I'd written months ago. One I never planned to send. It was addressed to him. I wrote it the night I finally forgave him in my heart, not for his sake, but for my own. I slipped his letter inside, then added my own note. David, thank you for your letter. I'm glad you're well. I have no anger left, no pain either. Life has been kind to me since I let go of the version of us that existed only in memory. I've learned that sometimes love doesn't die, it just changes form. What I feel now isn't love for you, but gratitude for what your absence taught me. You were a chapter, not my ending. Be well, Anna. The next morning, I mailed it. No tears, no hesitation, just quiet peace. And as I walked home, a strange lightness filled me, the kind that comes when you stop waiting for an apology to heal you. A week later, I received no response, and that was okay. Some stories don't need sequels, some hearts just need silence to finally rest. That night, as I painted, I realized that this, the woman I had become, was my masterpiece. I smiled and whispered to the empty room. He wanted someone younger, but I became timeless. Years passed, seasons shifted quietly, one blending into the next. I no longer counted time by heartbreak, but by the growth that followed it. The gallery had become my sanctuary, walls breathing with color, telling stories of resilience, rebirth, and silent triumphs. People often came up to me and said, "Your paintings feel like they've lived a life." And I'd smile, because they had my life. There were days when I'd still think of him, not with pain, but with distant warmth, like remembering a childhood song you no longer hum but still know the tune of. One evening, after another successful exhibition, a young woman approached me. She said softly, "Your story inspired me. My husband left me last year. I thought I was finished, but seeing you here, I feel hope again." I held her hand and whispered, "You're not finished. You're just beginning." Because that's what I had learned. Endings are often disguised as beginnings in life's grand design. When I went home that night, I stood before the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who once cried into her pillow, begging to be seen. Her eyes were softer, her voice calmer, her presence quieter, but her spirit stronger than ever. I thought about everything, the betrayal, the loneliness, the rediscovery, and I realized, sometimes, life has to break you to rebuild you. Sometimes, losing someone isn't punishment, it's liberation. I walked to my easel and began to paint one final piece for my new collection. The canvas showed a woman standing at the edge of the sea, her reflection glowing in the water beneath her. No sorrow in her eyes, no anger in her hands, only acceptance. At the bottom corner, I signed it simply, "To the woman I became." When the piece was unveiled months later, a journalist asked me, "What message do you want this painting to give?" I smiled and replied, that love, even when it leaves, still teaches us how to come home to ourselves. That night, as the crowd faded and lights dimmed, I stood alone in the empty gallery. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and lavender. I thought of him wherever he was, and whispered a quiet goodbye to the ghost of the past. Then, stepping into the night, under a soft silver moon, I finally understood. I wasn't the woman he left. I was the woman who learned to live without needing to be chosen. And as I walked away, I smiled, not because I won, but because I became.